I thought the wedding was still to come, but she whispered, "We married yesterday." Those words cut through me sharper than any knife. They weren't just words. They were a sentence that tore away years of hope, sacrifice, and the quiet dreams I had held close to my heart. I stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, as if the ground itself had given way beneath me. For a moment, I didn't even hear the rest of what she was saying. My mind replayed that single phrase, again and again, like a cruel echo in the room. We married yesterday. Yesterday. And I wasn't there. In that instant, a flood of images crashed into me. The pale pink dress I had chosen carefully, hanging in the closet waiting for its day. The shoes I bought so I could stand proudly in the wedding photos. The envelope of money I had saved, planning to gift it with trembling hands to show how much I wanted to bless their new life together. All of it now meaningless. All of it left behind in the shadows of a celebration where I did not exist. I had pictured myself smiling, standing beside my son, feeling the warmth of being part of his new beginning. Instead, I was cast out without a word, without an invitation, without even the courtesy of a lie to soften the blow. And what made it worse was the smile on her face when she said it. The kind of smile that carried no warmth, only the satisfaction of power. My son couldn't even meet my eyes. He looked down at the floor, silent, as if shame itself weighed him down. But shame cannot undo cruelty. Silence cannot erase betrayal. And I stood there, realizing that everything I had done, all the sacrifices I had made, meant nothing in this moment, because I had been erased. I wasn't just absent from their wedding. I was removed from the memory, deleted from the photos, written out of the script of their lives. The ceremony that should have been one of the most beautiful days of my life as a mother had been turned into a wound so deep I felt it might never heal. But here's the part no one saw, the part that happened inside me. In that silence, in that unbearable humiliation, something began to stir. Anger, not the fiery anger that makes you shout, but the quiet kind, the kind that seeps into your bones, heavy and cold, the kind that whispers, "This is the last time." I didn't know it then, but that single moment, that single line, would change everything. Because betrayal has a strange power. It breaks you, yes, but it also reveals the truth, strips away illusions, and forces you to see people for who they really are. And that's where my story begins. A story of love given freely, and love betrayed. A story of money sacrificed, of trust broken, of years spent believing that giving would earn me a place in their hearts. A story of a mother who poured out everything, her savings, her strength, her time, only to discover she was nothing more than an afterthought. But also a story of transformation, of how the deepest wounds can awaken a strength you didn't know you had, of how humiliation can become the seed of empowerment. Because this is not just a story about betrayal. It is a story about survival, about rediscovering dignity, about refusing to be silenced or used ever again. And so, before we go further, I will leave you with this question. What would you do if your own child erased you from the most important day of their life? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Or would you finally, after years of sacrifice, begin to fight for yourself? It began with a phone call that was supposed to be ordinary. I dialed my son's number, expecting to hear his voice, to ask the simplest question a mother can ask. "So, when's the wedding?" But it wasn't Max who answered. It was her, Lena. Her voice slid through the line calm, steady, almost rehearsed. "Oh," she said with a sweetness that felt like sugar hiding poison. "We already got married yesterday." My heart stopped. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear as if I hadn't heard correctly, as if the connection was bad, as if reality itself had misfired. "Yesterday?" The word caught in my throat. "Yes," she replied, and then she added the words that burned deeper than anything else. "We only invited special people." I gripped the phone as though it weighed 1,000 pounds, my knuckles white, my chest hollow. Special people. The phrase echoed again and again, each repetition carving a fresh wound. How could I not be special? For 3 years, I had paid their rent, bought their furniture, filled their fridge when it was empty. I had handed over money for bills, for gifts, for emergencies. I had given them my peace of mind, my savings, my stability, believing I was giving my son a chance at happiness. And yet, when it came to the day that should have been the most precious of his life, the one day I had dreamed of, I was nothing, not special, not even necessary. I looked around my room as her words sank in. There it was, the pale pink dress I had chosen weeks ago, still hanging untouched in my closet. I had spent hours trying it on, imagining how proud I would look standing in the wedding photos, finally part of the family celebration. Now it was nothing more than fabric, a useless decoration, a reminder of a place I would never stand. Beside it sat the shoes I had bought with care, shoes that would never touch the wedding floor. In the drawer lay the envelope of cash I had saved as a gift, money I had put aside from my retirement to give them something extra, to bless their beginning. My sister in Chicago was waiting for my call, expecting news about the ceremony. I had scrubbed my house clean, thinking maybe they would come after the ceremony to celebrate with me. Every plan, every detail, every small sacrifice had collapsed in a single second. 4 poisoned words. Only special people. I waited for Max to say something, to explain, to soften the blow, but he didn't. He stood silent in the background, letting Lena's words hang heavy in the air. When he finally did speak, his voice was stiff, rehearsed, like a line he had practiced. Mom, it was. It was just something very small. Just us and the witnesses. Nothing personal, but I knew better. Nothing personal? Then why had I already seen the photos online? Photos of Lena's parents standing proudly beside them. Her siblings smiling, toasting with champagne, her white dress glowing, the one I had helped pay for. Everyone was there, everyone but me. A sharp pain ran through me. Not just disappointment, but humiliation. Humiliation that spread like fire in my chest. The kind of pain that doesn't fade quickly. The kind that leaves marks. I was invisible on the most important day of my only son's life. I wasn't even considered family. I stood in my own living room, holding a phone that now felt like a weapon, as Lena settled comfortably on the sofa I had bought for them. My son wouldn't even meet my eyes. I was an outsider in the very life I had built for him. Shock froze me in place. Disbelief rattled in my bones. And behind it all, a deep, aching sorrow that felt too heavy to carry. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. I could only stand there, silent, while everything I thought I knew about my son's love for me crumbled like paper in the rain. And so, the call ended, not with joy, not with celebration, but with silence. A silence that filled my house, my heart, my future. That was the day I realized love, at least in their eyes, had nothing to do with sacrifice. It had everything to do with usefulness. And in that moment, I wasn't useful. I wasn't special. That night, I sat alone in the dim glow of my living room lamp, the silence pressing down on me heavier than any weight I had ever carried. The phone call replayed in my mind, looping endlessly like a cruel song I couldn't turn off. Special people. The words wouldn't leave me. They clung to me, taunting, reminding me of all I had done and all I had lost in a single breath. I looked around the room, and suddenly every object had a story. The sofa. They had picked it out, but I had paid for it. The dining table. I remembered carrying groceries across town, stocking their cupboards when they couldn't afford a meal. The small decorative vase on the shelf. It wasn't mine. It was Lena's. Something I had bought her when she said she wanted to make their apartment feel more like home. How much of my life had I poured into theirs? I started counting in my head, numbers swirling like ghosts. The $500 I sent every month for rent, the $200 here and there for food, the endless emergencies that always seemed to come at the worst times. I had given them over $20,000 in just a few years, scraping it from my pension, from my late husband's savings, from the little safety net I was supposed to live on. I told myself I was doing it out of love, that it was my job as a mother, that by helping them, I was securing my place in their lives, buying not their gratitude but their closeness, their need for me. I believed that when the wedding day came, when all the pieces of their life fell into place, I would finally see the return. A seat at the table, a role in the story, a place where I truly belonged. But now, staring at the pale pink dress hanging untouched in my closet, I realized the brutal truth. I had been invisible all along. With trembling hands, I opened my phone, half hoping it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Lena had meant something else. Maybe the ceremony had really been small, simple, private. Maybe the words, special people, didn't mean what they sounded like, but the screen told me otherwise. The first photo was Lena in her gown, radiant in white, standing next to Max in a neatly pressed suit. They both looked so happy, so full of life, and standing proudly on either side were Lena's parents, glasses of champagne raised, their smiles wide and genuine. I scrolled further. Her siblings laughing, friends posing in little groups, tables set with flowers and candles. There were toasts, laughter, music. A celebration so alive, so full of joy, except for the one thing missing. Me. Photo after photo confirmed what I didn't want to believe. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't overlooked me. They had deliberately erased me. As I stared at the glowing screen, the phrase special people rang louder in my mind. Who were these special people? Her parents, who hadn't spent a dime on their rent. Her siblings, who hadn't bought their groceries, or covered their car payments, or sacrificed their own plans to keep them afloat. What made them special? While I, the one who had given everything, was cast aside like nothing. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, though it sounded more like a sob. Special people. That was the game all along. I had thought love was enough. I had thought sacrifice was enough. But in their world, special didn't mean loyal. It didn't mean giving. It didn't even mean family. It meant useful, convenient, chosen. And I was none of those things anymore. I sat with the phone in my lap, my chest tight with a mix of rage and sorrow. Every smile in those photos cut me deeper, each one a reminder that while they celebrated, I sat alone in silence, dressed in nothing but disappointment. And yet, beneath the pain, something else began to stir. A question, a realization. If all my sacrifices could still leave me invisible, what had I been fighting for all these years? Why had I been so desperate to prove myself, to earn a place in lives that had already decided I didn't belong? I closed my phone, placed it face down on the table, and stared at the shadows crawling across my walls. The truth was undeniable now. I wasn't just forgotten. I wasn't overlooked. I was erased. And no amount of dresses, gifts, or money could write me back in. A week passed, though it felt like a lifetime. Each morning I woke with the same hollow ache in my chest, as though a piece of me had been stolen and replaced with silence. I tried to fill the days, cleaning the kitchen, watering the plants, walking through the park. But everything felt different now. The air was heavier, the colors duller. Even the sun seemed to shine less warmly than before. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Lena. For a moment I thought of letting it go to voicemail, of refusing her voice entry into my house. But curiosity, or maybe habit, made me answer. Her tone was nothing like the cool triumph of that day. It was rushed, desperate, trembling at the edges. "Renata," she said, "the rent is overdue. The landlord says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her words hung in the air, absurd in their casual cruelty. You forgot, as if it was my responsibility. As if 3 years of paying their rent had carved some invisible law that bound me to them forever. I was silent, my fingers gripping the phone. Images flooded back. Running to the bank on cold mornings, pulling money from my pension to keep them afloat, skipping dinners out so they could eat better, For years, I had canceled my own life just to keep theirs from falling apart. And this, after they had locked me out of their wedding, after they had looked me in the eye and said I wasn't special. This was what she dared to ask of me? My heart wanted to break all over again, to crumble into the old rhythm of obedience, to save them just one more time. But another part of me, the part that had been born in the fire of betrayal, rose to the surface. A voice I barely recognized, steady and calm, cut through my grief. "Lena," I said, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had heard in years. On the other end of the line, she stammered, "Renata, I don't understand." Of course she understood. She understood perfectly. It was her own words, her own cruelty, thrown back at her like a mirror. For the first time, it wasn't me trembling. It was her. Her voice softened, trying to weave its way back into my sympathy. "You're like a second mom to me. We've always been special to you." Lies. I could hear the falseness dripping through every syllable. I remembered every time she had called me sweetly only to end with a request, every hug that had come with a price tag, every promise that dissolved the moment my wallet closed. I thought of the $800 I had given her for that wedding dress, the same dress she wore in photos I wasn't allowed to see in person. I thought of the car loan, the groceries, the furniture. I thought of every time she had taken and smiled, until there was nothing left of me but an invisible provider. "No, Lena," I said quietly. "You are only special to my bank account, not to my heart." And that ends today. Another silence. I could almost hear her panic through the line, the gears of her mind spinning, searching for a new tactic. "Renata, please, we'll be homeless. We have no one else." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For years, that plea would have broken me, would have sent me running to the bank, wallet open, heart bleeding. But now, all I felt was clarity. A clarity sharper than any blade. "I suggest you call one of your special people," I whispered. "Because I am no longer one of them." Her sharp inhale was the last thing I heard before I pressed end call. When the line went dead, I sat in my chair, heart pounding, hands shaking. But it wasn't fear. It was power. For the first time in years, I had said no. I had drawn a line. And in that moment, something shifted. The balance of power, once so heavily in their favor, had tilted. Not completely, not yet, but enough for me to taste the possibility of freedom. I sat there for a long while, staring at the pale pink dress still hanging in the closet. And for the first time, it didn't look like a symbol of loss. It looked like evidence. Proof of the woman I had been, and the woman I was becoming. The woman who would no longer beg to be included. The woman who would no longer buy her way into love. That was the day the tide began to turn. That night, after Lena's call, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every memory, every transfer, every bill I had quietly covered. It was like a film reel of sacrifice, each frame another reminder of what I had given away without hesitation. Finally, I sat up, turned on the lamp, and pulled out my old checkbook, a stack of bank statements, and a notepad. If they saw me only as a provider, then I needed to see the truth too, in numbers, in black and white. I started with the rent. $500 every month, for 36 months. My pen scratched against the paper as I did the math. $18,000. My stomach clenched. That alone was more than most people could save in years, and I had handed it away piece by piece, month by month. Then came groceries. 200 here, 100 there. Just until payday. Max had said more times than I could count. At least $200 a month, maybe more. Over 3 years. That was another $7,200. I kept writing, my hand shaking now. The furniture for their living room, $1,200. The car loan, $2,500. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversaries, $3,000 at least. The air conditioner repair, $600. A medical bill for Lena, $800. Line after line, the list grew. I watched the total climb higher and higher, each digit hitting me like a blow. When I added it all up, the number stared back at me. $33,400. $33,400. I dropped the pen, staring at the page as tears welled up. But these weren't the soft tears of sadness. They burned hot against my skin, searing my cheeks with anger. I thought of my late husband, the man who had worked his whole life so I could live comfortably after he was gone. I had spent his gift to me, our gift, keeping two adults afloat who didn't even want me at their wedding. I thought of the little trips I had promised myself, the hobbies I had given up, the dinners I had turned down. All of it poured into a black hole of ungratefulness. My whole chest ached with the realization. I had not been a mother, not in their eyes. I had been an account, a wallet with legs, an ATM with feelings. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed, not because I had lost the money, but because I had lost myself. I had let them chip away at me, year after year, until there was nothing left but someone who measured love in bills and transfers. But as the sobs came, something else came too, a rising, almost frightening calm. A voice inside me, small at first, but growing stronger with each breath. Enough. Enough pretending that money could buy closeness. Enough hoping that sacrifice would earn me love. Enough living as if my worth depended on what I could give away. I wiped my eyes and stared at the numbers again, letting the anger fuel me instead of drown me. $33,400. It wasn't just money. It was years of my life, my comfort, my peace. And I had given it to people who saw me as nothing but a resource. Never again. That night, I made a promise to myself. No more transfers. No more surprise gifts. No more rushing to the bank whenever their world collapsed. They had taken enough. Money, time, dignity. They wouldn't take another piece of me. For the first time in years, I felt something shift deep inside. Not guilt, not obligation. Strength. I pushed the papers aside, turned off the lamp, and crawled back into bed. My cheeks were still wet, my eyes still swollen, but my heart was steady. Tomorrow, I would wake up not as their provider, not as their silent safety net. Tomorrow, I would wake up as myself again. It was a quiet afternoon when I heard the sound of car doors slamming outside my house. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. But then I glanced out the window and my heart dropped. Max's car, Lena's car, and another sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. 3 shadows moved up my driveway, their voices low and hurried. When I opened the door, they were already inside, as if the threshold of my home no longer belonged to me. Max sat heavily on the sofa, his head buried in his hands. Lena paced back and forth like a restless cat. And a man I had never seen before stood at my dining table, rifling through my personal papers as if they were his own. My voice came sharper than I expected. "What is happening here?" They all looked up, startled. It was Lena who spoke first. "Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's a family attorney." The man in the gray suit turned toward me with a polished smile, extending his hand. "Mrs. Richter, I'm here because your children are concerned about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, stepping past him to snatch my documents off the table. "I am doing perfectly fine." Max finally lifted his head, his voice carrying that rehearsed calm that never fooled me. "Mom, we're worried about you. You've been acting strange. First, you cut us off without explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think maybe you need some help." Help. That word, spoken so sweetly, soured on my tongue. Lena approached, her tone soft and syrupy. "Renata, honey, you know we love you, but at your age, stress and confusion are normal. We just want to make sure you're taken care of." Confusion. My blood ran cold. Now I understood. This wasn't a family visit. This was a staged intervention, a setup. Mr. Fisher opened his briefcase and laid out a stack of papers. A power of attorney, he explained smoothly. It would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently, just until you feel better. Nothing permanent. My stomach turned. I could almost hear the chains clinking as he spoke. I looked at Max, my son, my only child. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. I am not confused, I said, my voice steady, cutting through their act. And I do not need anyone to manage my money but me, Mom. Max sighed, frustration creeping into his voice. You're not being reasonable. You've been making reckless decisions, canceling transfers, ignoring us. Reckless? I snapped. You mean keeping the money your father and I earned for my future? Protecting myself from being drained by two adults who should be standing on their own feet. That's what you call reckless. Lena's face flushed red. We never treated you badly. Your family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. Her words hit me harder than a slap. For them, I wasn't even alive anymore. I was an inheritance waiting to be collected. Mr. Fisher slid the papers toward me. Mrs. Richter, refusing help in your condition could be interpreted as denial. This document would only protect you. I took the folder in my hands, held it for a moment, then hurled it straight into the trash. The sound of it landing echoed through the room like a gavel strike. No, I said. The only transition happening here is you three, to the front door. Lena's eyes filled with sudden tears. Though they weren't tears of sadness, they were of frustration, of rage. You can't do this to us, Renata. We've built our lives counting on you. We have obligations, rent, car payments, credit cards you co-sign for. You can't just abandon us. I can, I said, my voice rising for the first time. And I have. You've mistaken my love for weakness. But I see clearly now. I am not your bank. I am not your safety net. I am not your victim. Max shot up from the sofa, his face twisted with anger. Mom, this is going to end badly for you. If you push us away, you'll end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it. I looked straight at him, and for the first time, there was no fear in my chest, only clarity. Max, I am already alone. The only difference is that now it's by choice, not neglect. For a moment, the room was silent, the air thick with their stunned disbelief. Then, with wounded pride, they gathered their things. Mr. Fisher snapped his briefcase shut. Lena wiped her cheeks angrily. Max glared at me one last time, as if trying to sear guilt into my skin, but it didn't work. As the door shut behind them, the silence that followed was not heavy. It was liberating. A silence that rang with the sound of battle lines being drawn. This wasn't over. I knew it. They would fight harder, push further, find new ways to try to take control. But so would I. The war had begun. The morning after the confrontation, I woke with an energy I hadn't felt in years. My body was tired, yes, but my mind was sharper than ever. For once, I wasn't waking to dread a phone call or to check if my son needed money. I was waking for myself. The first thing I did was walk to the bank. Mr. Klein, the branch manager who had processed my transfers for years, greeted me with his usual polite smile. He must have sensed something different in my posture, because his smile softened into concern. Mrs. Richter, are you here for another transfer? He asked gently. No, I said firmly. I'm here to cancel them, all of them, effective immediately. His eyebrows rose in surprise. For years, my monthly transfers to Max and Lena had been as routine as the sunrise. But as he typed on his computer and handed me the paperwork, a strange weight lifted from my shoulders. Each canceled payment felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I stepped back outside, the air seemed fresher. The world didn't look so gray. For the first time in 3 years, my money was mine again. But that was only the first step. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store. Mr. Summers, the owner, recognized me at once. Mrs. Richter, he greeted warmly. What can I help you with? Another repair for your son's apartment? No, I answered, meeting his eyes with quiet resolve. This time, it's for my house. I need new locks. The best you have. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. Good choice. As I examined the locks, his son Ethan came in, a tall, kind-eyed man who worked installing security systems. Mrs. Richter, he said, would you like us to also put in cameras? These days, it's always better to feel safe. Yes, I said without hesitation. Install everything. I want my home protected. The next morning, while Ethan worked on my doors and mounted the cameras, I stood watching with a strange sense of pride. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, protecting myself not from strangers, but from my own family. And yet, it didn't make me feel weak. It made me feel strong. Later that week, I noticed a woman standing by her garden as I walked past. She was older, silver-haired, with kind eyes and a mug of tea in her hands. When she saw me, she smiled softly. You must be Mrs. Richter, she said. I'm Eleanor. I live just next door. We had been neighbors for years, but somehow we had never spoken. That day, something in her expression told me she already knew part of my story. Yesterday, I heard raised voices, she said gently. I was worried about you. Is everything all right? Her concern disarmed me. For a moment, I didn't know what to say, but something inside me longed to speak, to let it out. So I invited her in for coffee. Sitting at my kitchen table, I told her everything. The wedding, the rent, the betrayal, the lawyer. She listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, her eyes heavy with understanding. When I finished, she reached across the table and touched my hand. Mrs. Richter, she said, you are not alone. I went through the same thing with my daughter years ago. I thought giving her everything would make her love me. I thought money could glue us together. But it only pushed us apart. Her words were like balm on an open wound. To hear my own pain echoed in another woman's voice gave me a strength I hadn't felt before. What happened? I asked. I stopped paying, she said simply. She hated me at first. She said terrible things. But over time, she learned to stand on her own, and I learned to live for myself again. I felt tears sting my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that my story wasn't unique. Relief that other women had survived this kind of betrayal and come out stronger. That evening, after Eleanor left, I stood in front of the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a tired, used-up woman who existed only for others. I saw someone reclaiming her life, one step at a time, canceling the transfers, changing the locks, installing the cameras. Those were practical steps. But meeting Eleanor, hearing her story, realizing I wasn't alone, those were the steps that rebuilt my spirit. And as I looked into my own eyes, I whispered the truth I had been too afraid to say out loud until now. They will not break me. Not anymore. It was a Friday morning when the letter arrived. A thick envelope with my name printed neatly on the front. But the return address made my stomach twist. Family Court. My hands trembled as I opened it, the paper crackling in my fingers. The words leapt off the page. Petition for guardianship. Max and Lena had filed a formal suit to have me declared legally incompetent. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sank into my chair, the letter clutched in my hands, my eyes darting over the sentences again and again. They weren't just asking for help. They weren't just pressuring me. They were trying to strip me of my freedom, to put my entire life, my money, my choices, my dignity, under their control. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my house pressing down like a heavy blanket. Fear curled in my stomach, cold and sharp. What if a judge believed them? What if they succeeded? What if, after everything I had endured, I was forced to live under their thumb until the day I died? But beneath the fear was something stronger. Rage. I thought of Lena's smug smile, of Max's downcast eyes, of the words, special people, that had started this nightmare. No, they had taken enough. They would not take this. The next morning, I walked into the office of Mr. Weber, a lawyer I had known years ago when my husband passed away. He had helped me sort through wills and paperwork back then, and I remembered him as a man with a sharp mind and a steady sense of justice. When I laid the court papers in front of him, his jaw tightened. He read them carefully, flipping pages with quick, practiced fingers. "Mrs. Richter," he said at last, "what your son and daughter-in-law are attempting is called elder financial exploitation. It's more common than you might think. They're trying to use the law as a weapon. But the good news is, you have the truth on your side." I swallowed hard. "The truth isn't always enough in court." He leaned forward. "Then we'll give them more than truth, we'll give them proof." For the next 3 hours, we went through everything, every bank transfer, every rent payment, every gift. I had kept the receipts, the statements, the records. Piece by piece, we built a paper trail that told the real story, not of a confused old woman, but of a mother bled dry by manipulation. When Mr. Weber added the totals, he whistled under his breath. $33,400 in 3 years. "Mrs. Richter, with that money you could have traveled the world. Instead, you kept 2 adults in comfort while they planned ways to push you aside." His words stung, but they also lit something inside me. For so long, I had felt foolish, guilty, even ashamed. But here, in black and white, was the evidence. It wasn't love that had driven them. It was greed. And now, the law would see it too. "We'll also gather witnesses," Mr. Weber continued. "Your neighbor, the hardware store owner, anyone who's seen your clarity, your independence. We'll document your health, your mental state. If they want a battle, they'll get one, but on our terms." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. It wasn't relief. Not entirely. The fear still lingered, heavy and real. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally. I had someone who saw me not as weak, but as wronged. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had cried weeks earlier while calculating every dollar I had lost. But this time, the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt something different rising in me. Resolve. I thought of Eleanor, of the women she had told me about who had walked through their own battles. I thought of my late husband, who had trusted me with our savings because he knew I was strong enough to carry on without him. I thought of all the times I had silenced my own voice for fear of losing my son's love, only to discover that love had never really been there. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused. I wasn't alone. The legal war had begun, yes. But I finally understood. It wasn't just a war for my money. It was a war for my dignity. And this time, I intended to win. As I turned off the light and headed to bed, the papers from the court still sat on the table. They didn't terrify me anymore. They fueled me. For the first time in years, I felt like the strongest person in the room. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a mix of history and judgment. I walked through its tall doors with my head held high, though my knees trembled beneath me. I wore my best black suit, the one I had saved for special occasions. Today was one. Not a celebration, but a fight for my freedom. Max and Lena were already there. Max stood stiff in a brand new suit, his hair perfectly combed, his face a mask of calm he had practiced in front of the mirror. Lena was dressed in black too, as though attending a funeral. Maybe she was our family's. Her eyes found mine, and for a moment they glistened with fake sorrow before hardening into cold steel. Their lawyer, an older man with silver hair and an easy confidence, shook their hands as though the case was already won. When he looked at me, it wasn't with kindness, but with calculation, like I was a problem to be solved. The judge entered, and we all rose. He was a serious man with kind but sharp eyes, Judge Miller. I clung to that small comfort. Mr. Weber had told me he was fair, not easily swayed by theatrics. The lawyer for Max and Lena began his opening. "Your Honor, we are here today because Mrs. Richter, a 71-year-old widow, has shown alarming signs of mental decline. She has cut off her family without warning. installed unnecessary security systems, and isolated herself under the influence of outsiders. We are asking for guardianship to protect her from herself. His words painted me as a fragile, paranoid woman. I felt my stomach knot. But Mr. Weber leaned toward me and whispered, "Remember, they have to prove it. Stay calm." Then came the witnesses. Lena was first. She walked to the stand, her steps small, her expression perfect for sympathy. Her voice trembled as she began. "Renata has always been like a second mother to me, but lately, she's changed. She's become hostile, suspicious. She cut us out of her life completely. We're terrified for her safety." Her crocodile tears flowed easily. At one point, she dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, her voice breaking. "It hurts so much to see her like this. We only want to take care of her." I clenched my fists. The woman who had looked me in the eye and said I wasn't special was now pretending to be my devoted daughter. Mr. Weber rose for the cross-examination. His voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Lena blinked, caught off guard. "Well, we always talked about many things. A specific date, please." She hesitated. "I don't remember. Is it true," Mr. Weber continued, "that you and your husband married without inviting my client?" "It was a very small ceremony," she said quickly. "Did you tell her she wasn't a special person?" Her face flushed red. "Those words were taken out of context." "What context?" Mr. Weber asked coolly. "Would make them acceptable." Lena's lips parted, but no sound came. Next was Max. Seeing him walk to the stand broke something in me. This was my son, the boy I had raised alone, the boy whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose nightmares I had soothed. And yet, here he was, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about me. "My mom has always been generous," he began, his voice steady. "But lately, she's been irrational, canceling rent payments without warning, ignoring us, locking us out of her house. We believe she's being manipulated by people who don't care about her." My chest ached. Manipulated. That was what he thought of me, an old fool, too weak to think for herself. Mr. Weber stood. "Mr. Richter, how much money has your mother given you and your wife in the last 3 years?" I don't know exactly. Would 33,400 sound accurate?" Max shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe. How many times have you visited her without asking for money?" Silence. "Is it true you broke into her home without permission and examined her private papers? We were worried about her. Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney?" Max's jaw tightened. "We wanted to help her manage her finances. At 35 years old, do you need your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent?" Max's lips pressed shut. He had no answer. The cracks in their case were showing. Their neighbor, Mr. Davis, testified next, saying I had been acting erratically, installing cameras, yelling at my family in the street, surrounding myself with strangers. But under cross-examination, he admitted he had never spoken to me directly and was basing everything on what he'd seen from across the street. Their final witness was a doctor, Dr. Lehman, who claimed my refusal to undergo a psychiatric exam was proof of decline. Mr. Weber countered by submitting the evaluation from Dr. Moore, who testified in person that my cognitive tests were excellent, well above average for my age. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, explained how Lena had tricked him into signing a statement that distorted the truth about my medications. Mr. Summers, the hardware store owner, testified about my clarity and decisiveness when purchasing locks. Ethan, who installed the cameras, confirmed I had acted rationally, asking good questions and making practical decisions. Eleanor took the stand and, with quiet strength, spoke of our conversations, of my awareness, of my courage to cut off financial abuse. "I have seen her grow stronger each day," she said. "This is not a woman in decline. This is a woman finally finding her voice." Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the stand with my heart pounding. Mr. Weber guided me gently through my story, The rent, the food, the gifts, the $33,000 drained away, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the manipulation, the pressure, the threats. Why? Mr. Weber asked. Did you stop supporting your son and daughter-in-law? I lifted my chin. Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome. I was not. The courtroom was silent. Their lawyer tried to trip me up, asking rapid questions, implying I was confused. But I answered each one calmly, clearly. I refused to let them twist my words into weakness. When both sides rested, Judge Miller left the room to deliberate. 2 hours felt like 2 years. I sat gripping Eleanor's hand, staring at the wood grain of the bench, praying silently. Finally, the judge returned. His expression was firm but not unkind. After reviewing the evidence, he said, "It is clear to this court that Mrs. Richter is fully competent. Professional evaluations confirm her mental clarity. Her financial decisions, though painful for her family, are rational and well within her rights. This petition for guardianship is denied." Relief swept through me like a tide. I had won, not just my case, but my freedom. Max and Lena stood frozen, their lawyer whispering furiously. Lena's face twisted into hate. Max wouldn't meet my eyes. For a brief second, I thought I saw regret flash across his face, but it was too late. When I walked out of that courtroom, I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. I was stronger. I was free. And the silence that followed me wasn't loneliness anymore. It was victory.
When I stepped out of the courthouse, the autumn air felt different, cooler, lighter, almost electric. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of their demands, their threats, their voices pressing me down. I was walking into freedom. Behind me, Max and Lena trailed out, their faces hard with defeat. Lena's eyes locked on mine, filled not with sorrow, but with rage. Her lips pressed thin as if she wanted to spit poison, but couldn't in front of the judge's doors. Max glanced at me once, just for a second, but quickly turned away. If there was regret hiding in his eyes, it wasn't strong enough to overcome the anger. They got into their car and drove off without a word. I stood on the courthouse steps, inhaling deeply. The silence that wrapped around me was different now. Not the silence of abandonment, not the silence of humiliation, but the silence of freedom. For the first time in years, silence felt like peace. When I got home, I didn't rush to check the phone. I didn't worry about unanswered calls. I simply opened my front door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me with a soft click. That sound, the door shutting on their manipulation, felt like the sweetest music. I walked into the living room and sat down. My house was still and quiet. No cars in the driveway that didn't belong there. No strangers going through my papers. No voices telling me I was confused or incapable. Just me. Just my space. And for the first time in a long time, being alone wasn't painful. It was beautiful. I thought back to what Max had said in anger. "You'll end up alone, with no one to take care of you." But he was wrong. I wasn't alone. Not really. I had Eleanor, who had become a true friend. I had the women from her garden club, who had listened, shared, and stood by me when I needed witnesses. I had Mr. Weber, who had fought for me with more loyalty than my own child. And most importantly, I had myself. That night, I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street. For years, every decision I made had been about them, their bills, their emergencies, their happiness. Now, for the first time, I asked myself, what do I want? The answer didn't come all at once, but it came softly, like a whisper. I wanted to live, truly alive. In the days that followed, I began small. I treated myself to a haircut I had postponed for years, sitting in the salon chair as Cynthia, my stylist, ran her hands through my hair. "You look lighter," she told me when she was done. She was right. It wasn't just my hair. It was my spirit. I bought myself a new dress, not for anyone else's event, not to fit into a photo I would never be invited to, but just for me. I wore it around the house, laughing at the silliness of sipping coffee in a dress too nice for the kitchen. And yet, it felt perfect. Eleanor invited me over one evening, and I sat at her table surrounded by her family. They spoke to each other with respect, with warmth. They asked me about my day, listened to my answers, and no one once mentioned money. I realized then what I had been missing all those years: connection without condition. At night, I would lie in bed and think about the $33,000 I had lost. But strangely, the number didn't sting as much anymore, because I knew now that what I had gained was worth far more. I had gained clarity, boundaries, freedom. Sometimes I still thought of Max as a little boy, the way his hand used to slip into mine, the way he would curl up beside me during storms. Those memories hurt, but they also reminded me of something vital. I had loved him with everything I had. I had done my part as a mother. What he chose as an adult was no longer mine to carry. One afternoon, I walked through the park near my house. The leaves were turning gold, the air crisp with the first hints of winter. Children laughed as they ran across the grass, their mothers calling after them. I sat on a bench and smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by resentment. I wasn't trying to buy love. I was simply present. When I got home, I brewed another cup of tea and sat at my dining table, the same table where I had once calculated every dollar they drained from me, where I had cried from humiliation and fear. Now, that table bore something else: peace. I set down my cup, looked around my quiet house, and whispered aloud. For the first time in years, the silence around me is freedom, not loneliness. And I believed it. It has been 6 months since the day Judge Miller ruled in my favor. 6 months since I walked out of that courtroom with my dignity intact and my freedom restored. And in those months, I have lived more fully than I had in years. I moved into a smaller apartment near the city center, bright, cozy, filled only with the things that make me happy. I bought myself new paints and brushes, and every morning, I set up my easel by the window. The canvas is where I release all the colors I had buried for so long. Reds of anger, blues of sadness, yellows of joy. For years, I painted only in silence inside my heart. Now, I let the world see. I traveled too. I went to places I used to dream about while writing checks for other people's lives. I stood before the Eiffel Tower, sipping coffee at a Paris cafe. I rowed a boat through the canals of Venice, listening to music echo against stone walls. I walked through quiet gardens in London, breathing in the scent of roses. Every step reminded me, this is what my money was meant for. Not for paying rent for grown adults, not for being treated like an ATM, but for creating memories that belong to me. And perhaps most precious of all, I found friendship. Eleanor and I grew close, our bond built on shared wounds and newfound strength. She introduced me to her garden club friends, and together we laughed, shared meals, and swapped stories. For the first time in years, I wasn't a provider. I was simply myself. And that was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I think of Max. I wonder if he regrets the choices he made, or if Lena still whispers poison in his ear. I don't hate him. I don't think I ever could. But I no longer confuse love with sacrifice. I gave him everything a mother could give, and more. What he chose to do with that love is no longer my burden to carry. What I've learned is simple, though it took me years and $33,000 to understand. True love cannot be bought. If you have to pay for it, it isn't love. If you have to beg for it, it isn't family. Today, I no longer fear silence. In fact, I cherish it. Silence in my home means peace. Silence in my heart means strength. And now, as I sit here writing these words, I want to turn to you, the one listening to my story. I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have kept giving, hoping that love might one day be returned? Or would you, too, have found the courage to say no? I would love to know your thoughts. Share them in the comments, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever felt used, unappreciated, or erased by the very people they love most. Stories like this aren't just mine. They belong to countless others who suffer in silence. And if my story touched you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or if it gave you strength to draw your own boundaries, then I ask you for one simple thing. Stay with me. Subscribe to this channel. Share this story with others. Because the more we speak about betrayal, the less power it has to break us. Every week, I will bring you stories like this of pain, of strength, of survival. Stories that remind us that no matter how deep the wound, there is always a way forward. So tell me, where are you listening from? What part of the world hears my voice tonight? Leave a comment and let me know, because even though I sit here in my little apartment, I know I am not alone, and neither are you. This is the truth I leave with you. Love is not measured in money or gifts or endless sacrifice. Love is measured in respect, in presence, in care. And when those things are absent, you must love yourself enough to walk away. I have walked away, and in doing so, I have finally found myself.